But speaking of extraordinary, we also have events unfolding in Ferguson, Missouri, and all over North America. Rallies, protests in support of what has happened in that city. Here is something extraordinary. And Darren Wilson, who of course was the officer who shot and killed Michael Brown, he broke his silence yesterday with ABC's George Stephanopoulos. Here's what he had to say.
He grabbed the top of my gun. And when he grabbed it, he said, "You're too much of a to shoot me."
You'd never even shot your gun before, and now a man is dead.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you could have done differently that would have prevented that killing from taking place?
No.
Nothing?
No.
And you're absolutely convinced, when you look through your heart and your mind, that if Michael Brown were white, this would have gone down in exactly the same way?
Yes.
No question.
No question.
All right, there's still a lot of people that want the questions answered, but let's bring back JJ McCullough and Justin Ling, our Sun News contributors. Okay, JJ, that's the officer's words. Now, in just more support to buttress what the grand jury had decided not to indict Officer Wilson, was the release of all the court testimony, all the witness testimony, but none of that seems to be allaying these protesters, these people that are just acting like hooligans out there. But first and foremost, your reaction to what Officer Wilson had to say.
I thought it was quite striking. I watched the interview. One thing that really hits you is just how young he is. I mean, he's only 28 years old. It's 2 years younger than I am. And you just you listen to him and he seems like just a very serious, level-headed, moderate, mellow sort of guy. And when he tells the story about, his confrontation with Michael Brown, that he was frightened of him, that Michael Brown was this big, imposing guy, that grabbed his gun through the police car window and, charged at him and all this kind of thing, I'm inclined to believe Wilson. And he seems like a credible enough witness that you can understand why he was persuasive to the grand jury. So I mean, the idea that Officer Wilson is this kind of demonic, evil, racist, bigot that he's sort of been framed as, that he killed Michael Brown just because he had some sort of, hunger for black blood and just wanted to see a black kid get shot.
Well, okay,
I mean, it just doesn't seem to be borne out. No, some people are saying that, absolutely.
I don't think anyone's saying that. What they're saying is that this guy was acting negligent on the job, that he opened fire when he didn't have to, and he kept shooting. And that's what every other witness has said. Virtually every other witness that's come forward has given a different course of events than Darren Wilson did. And now Darren Wilson sits before a national TV audience, gives a story that does not seem to be supported by any sort of facts. And that's the story the grand jury believed, and he's not facing charges because of it. And I think it's frankly disgusting that he even chose to do this. He knew it would inflame tensions. He knew it would offend the family. And I don't even know why he's only credible because he's the cop in this scenario.
That's very critical, though. See, that's the crux of the matter, Justin, right? Is that in the legal, system that we have, the fact is that your cops are granted extraordinary deference when it comes to killing when they perceive their own lives to be in danger. So that is really the crux of the story. If we have a problem with that cops are given too much deference to kill anybody who they find to be threatening, fine, we can have that debate. My problem with this is the way that this is being dressed up as a sort of racial issue, when I think it's not. It is, at best, it's an issue of maybe cops have too much leeway when it comes to shooting anybody that they perceive to be threatening to them. The fact is that Wilson perceived Michael Brown to be a threat to himself, to be a threat to his life and his personal safety.
That's what he said.
Well, that's what he said. It's what he said, though, and that's what matters.
In every other account from every other witness, they said that Wilson was the one to instigate the violence there. They said he was the one that started cussing out.
The law is on the cop's side. The law says that what the cop perceives is what matters.
Because you feel like it.
Guys,
it said you can't
we have to let each other
streets.
talk, otherwise this makes for really bad TV. Go ahead, Justin.
The law also says that the cops can't beat up people on the street, even if they have committed a crime. The law says you can't open fire on somebody who has their hands up and who is of no immediate threat. We can't just take cops' words for it because they said it on TV or they said it before a grand jury. The grand jury was wrong to dismiss these charges. There should be a complete investigation. And honestly, there should be an investigation into how the Missouri police handled this. Immediately after the shooting, there was no report filed by the officer. There was no actual investigation done until weeks afterwards. This was a failure of the police service, and it's a failure of the court system to address it.
All right. Do you want to, of course, JJ, I'm sure you want to respond. Go ahead.
Well, for one thing, I don't think that the witness testimony was nearly as unanimous as Justin is making it seem to be. I do not think it was just strictly you had sort of unanimous consent in one sort of analysis, and then Officer Wilson was way off in some other frame. But again, like I said, what matters in the eyes of the law is that Officer Wilson perceived his life to be in danger, and he was acting in self-defense as he perceived it. You can say he was perhaps overzealous, perhaps he overacted. I do think that he overacted. I do think that it is an unmistakable tragedy that Michael Brown died the way that he did. But the fact is that the law is the law, and the law says that in these kinds of situations, we defer to the cop's judgment. This is why the only people that ever get out of grand juries in the way that he did are generally cops, because the law is so on their side. And maybe that's problematic, but that's the law, and the law has to be interpreted as it's written.
All right, but this isn't stopping people, regardless of what side you agree or disagree with this. They are literally burning the city of Ferguson, Missouri down to the ground. I'm not sure how stealing, sneakers and alcohol really shows, your solidarity with the death of Michael Brown. I don't get that, but this is what happens with looters and the sort of collective mindset of what goes on. But we've had protests in Toronto, in Ottawa, other parts of North America. Quick response from both of you guys. I want to ask you this. Belen Arte, who was the Ottawa organizer, she put on her Facebook post, white non-black allies should, quote, refrain from taking up space and never be the center of anything. Justin, let me go to you first and foremost on a response to that.
The matter here is that it is a racialized issue. I mean, just in the same way the Rodney King riots were not for white people to come out and protest the state. This is a matter of black kids being shot in the street by cops who don't have to face the full extent of the law because they did so. And I can't blame them at all for feeling that way. I can't blame them at all for wanting to raise this issue in the African American community. It's entirely justifiable and reasonable for them to do so, and I think good for them. I mean, any looting that happens is obviously wrong, but looting happens when there's a hockey riot. Looting happens when there's a G20 riot. Looting will always happen if there's a mass demonstration. That's what happens.
Okay, JJ, last word to you, a quick one.
It's just being framed as a moral panic. There is no evidence to suggest that there is some sort of pandemic in America of white cops gunning down unarmed black kids. There is just no evidence to suggest that's the case. In fact, there's a lot of evidence to no, there's not. There's not. It is being whipped up as a moral panic because there's a lot of people out there who like to frame everything as a racial issue, who like to sort of gain the sort of political and partisan and ideological bona fides that come from framing everything as a racial issue, that like whipping up black people to be in perpetually sort of adversarial relationships with sort of the white community. It's really quite terrible that people are manipulating an unmistakable tragedy for their own political and ideological purposes.
All right, gentlemen, we're going to leave it there, but of course we will have both of you back. Much more to discuss on this. Big thank you to both of you.